Welcome back, students, to another Logical Learner session. And today we are doing history, and we have chosen the topic historiography. Historiography means study of historical writings. So we study the writings of the past and we develop history. But it is not possible to do laboratory experiments and all the observations because it is not in the present, it is done in the past. It is beyond our space and time. So, therefore, for understanding history better, we need an historical expert who knows the language of the script of the historical documents. He should be able to understand what is written inside those historical documents and he should be able to decipher the meaning behind. He should be able to read and understand the meaning of the documents. And the expert should also examine the authenticity of those documents. There are many criteria by which he should examine the authenticity, such as the lettering style, the author style of writing, the manufacturing date, the type of paper, and the stamp of authority. By all these criteria, he should be able to examine the authority of the documents. Now, moving on, we look upon some of the historical methods which are useful for historical research purposes. So, how do we find those events of history? So, there are many methods, one of which, such as archaeology. Archaeology is the study of excavated artifacts and physical remains of the past which are buried. So, we unearth them and we study them and we develop the time period and history. The second method is archival science. So, archival science means the study of various historical documents, recordings, and data which is stored of the past. We unearth them and we start researching on them and we develop the history by researching those documents. The third method is manuscriptology. In manuscriptology, we study prehistoric handwritten documents. The word manuscript here means the documents which are written by hand. So, manuscriptology is the study of prehistorical documents and developing history based on that. The fourth method is epigraphy. Epigraphy means study of inscriptions which are written on the walls or copper plates in the past by the kings. So we study what is written on them. The fifth method is numismatic. It is the study of prehistorical coins and old age coins which are minted by the kings. So we develop a lineage and the time period according to the coins which are published at that time. And the last method is the study of lineage, which is also known as genealogy. So, genealogy means study of lineages, in which we study the ancient kings and their families and how the throne was passed on to the next generation. So, the last method of historical research is genealogy. Now, moving on, what are the traditions of historiography? How the historiography started in the first place? How did people pass on the information of the history? So, ancient people felt the need of passing of information. They used to write stories of the life and the valor of the ancestors so that the next generation could know what their forefathers used to do. So, previously, many ancient communities all over the world use various methods such as cave paintings. In cave paintings, they used to draw about the historical events and tell them to the future generations that how they used to live. Another method is storytelling, in which orally many people passed on many great stories about many great historical events. So, in this way, people used to tell stories about the past events. The third method is singing song, which is a very famous method because songs are easy to remember. So many people used to sing songs about many historical events and pass on that information from one generation to another. And lastly, the ballads. The ballads are songs which tell stories and they are passed orally. So ballads are usually about a war or about a king or any famous knight which tells the stories how they survived. So all these methods are traditions method of historiography which helped us telling about history. These are the sources of history in the modern historiography. Now we use this for modern historiology, these sources. And now moving on to the modern methods of historiography, how in the new age we study historiography. So modern historiography is a method which is based on science now. It is based on scientific principles. It begins with the formation of relevant questions. So we apply a logical approach to study history. So the very first thing that we do is to ask logical questions so that we can understand the events of the past in a logical manner and we get answers to the important questions. But there are many criteria to this. The very first criteria for modern historiography is that the questions are supposed to be anthropocentric. Now, the word here anthropocentric means that the questions should be about the deeds of the members of the ancient human society of the particular period. And the answer to the questions of this anthropocentric question should be supported by reliable evidence. History should present a graph of the mankind's journey with the help of his past human deeds. So there should be a graphical knowledge. And a fun fact here, the modern history took its root from Greek medieval writings. The modern history was originally a Greek term. History came from a Greek term. Herodotus, the Greek historian in the 5th century, in his book entitled Histories, used the word history. Now, moving on to the development of scientific perspective in Europe. How in Europe historiography started from a scientific perspective. So, till the 18th century, Europe has achieved a remarkable progress in the field of philosophy. So, many scholars try to put scientific methods in understanding historical truth. And in 1737, the Göttingen University was founded in Germany, and it was the very first university to had an independent department of history. So, this is the development from the perspective of Europe. Europe contributed by the means of scholars and by making a Göttingen University. Now, moving on to some of the notable scholars and the contribution to the development of history. The very first scholar is René Descartes. He insisted on the verifying of reliability of documents. He determined the authenticity of the documents, and he stressed on verifying the reliability of those documents and critically examining them. So that was the approach which was used by René Descartes. And moving on, the next scholar is Voltaire. His original name was Francois Marie Arouet. He was a French, and he suggested that the social tradition, trade, economy, and agriculture, etc., was equally important in historiography. So he stressed on the social tradition, trade, economy, and agriculture, and he stressed that those are the points which should be focused when we are studying history. The next historian is George William Friedrich Hegel. Hegel was a German philosopher, and he insisted that the historical reality should be presented in a logical manner. He thought the presentation of history is bound to change over time because new evidence is collected. So he stressed on the new evidence collecting and changing the history over the course of period of time. Now, moving on to the next historian, he is Leopold von Ranke. He spoke about the critical methods of historical research, and he stated that the document is the need and it is to be examined with greatest care. And he criticized the imaginative narration of history. He said that imagination has no part in history. And he published two books entitled The Theory of Practice of History and The Secret of World History. Now, moving on to the next historian, a very important historian, Karl Marx. He formulated a new thesis, and according to Marx, history was about abstract idea. Human relationships are formed by those ideas. And according to Marx, human history is a class struggle. As the class owners control the means of production, it exploits the rest of the class. He wrote the book Das Kapital about it. And lastly, moving on to the last historian is Michael Foucault. He was a French historian who brought forth a new concept in historiography, and he argued in his book Archaeology of Knowledge that the prevailing practices of arranging the historical event in chronological order is not correct, and we should not strive to reach the ultimate historical truth, but we should understand those facts. Lastly, moving on to feminist historiography. Feminist historiography means restructuring of history from the perspective of women. The writings of Simone de Beauvoir helped in establishing the fundamentals of feminism. She was a French woman, and she emphasized that the inclusion of women of history should be there, and we should not be only thinking from the male dominated perspective of history. She drove in historical research to focus into more depth about the woman life in the history, such as the role in employment, the role in the trade unions, the role in the institution, how the woman life drived history and changed the course of history. And after 1900, women were portrayed as independent social class. So this bring us to the end of the session, and this video was brought to you by Logical Learners. I hope it cleared many concepts about history and you learned a lot of things about history from this video. So please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel if you want more videos like this and you want us to keep us producing more videos. Thank you so much.